Welcome back to the Back in the Gap podcast. Today, I'm joined by my co-hosts Ware and Travis. And on this podcast, we talk about life back in the gap and how those stories can educate our future. Today, we're talking about boldness slash self-confidence, how each of us was really bad at it at one point in time, and how we're still bad at it, but we're getting better. So, let's just jump into it.
Yeah, I'm not naturally a confident person.
Me neither.
Really, that shocks me. I thought that you'd be more of a natural, confident person.
Or I don't know if you remember me before I was in high school.
Well, I mean, I remember a little bit, but I mean, I know quite people who are very confident though. Whenever they get that chance to speak.
Don't mix up outgoing with confidence.
Okay.
I think that's a big one because for myself, growing up, I was very outgoing, loud. I kind of, secluded myself a little bit more in my high school years. But can you stop? What is happening here?
I'm trying to turn my headset up. Sorry,
But
I couldn't hear it much.
a lot of it was attention seeking, right? There was a level of confidence there. But a lot of it was, well, I want to be seen by a lot of people. If that makes sense, right?
Where I'm so sorry.
We're keeping this in, right?
Yeah.
I was trying to.
Where
I
is
was trying to turn the
the
audio.
laugh track?
Well, because
Oh my
I can't hear very well.
Yeah,
This is Disabilities Day, so
That's true.
that's an interesting angle. How do you think that your deafness plays into your shame?
my what?
Your shame.
Shame.
Yes.
I thought this was a discussion about boldness and confidence.
Well, you have to be ashamed before you can grow over that, right?
So, are you saying I should be ashamed?
I'm sorry.
For those of you who don't know, we have another.
We have our other co-host Josh
All of you keep looking over at me.
I'm not
behind
looking
the
at
camera,
Josh.
and he's just dying.
I'm not looking at Josh. I'm ignoring.
But here's the thing.
him.
Okay, in all seriousness, though, that's a good angle to take it, at least for me and Travis. Because I can't speak for his experience, but I know for me, having a stutter, it affected me, which we can get into that at one point. But Travis was talking, so I don't know what you were saying.
Well, I do think that my hearing or lack of it has kind of contributed in the past. But the hard thing is you don't really. I have no idea how bad it may have affected it because. Like, I grew up having no idea, just assuming that that's how everybody else was. So,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it really affected me too much.
Okay.
I'm the opposite. I was a wreck. It's hard to talk about without going into like my testimony because that's like a big part.
Yeah.
But to make it short and just kind of straight to the point, basically like yes, because I view myself as less than because I didn't talk like other people did.
Yeah.
To make a long story short, I had very like low self-esteem because of that, and I listen. I mean, this is gonna get really like heavy here. I mean, is this more of like an uplifting type, or because I don't want to get too dark here.
I don't want to make you go anywhere you don't want to go.
Yeah,
But I think that,
I mean, like I'll go there.
Having the low brings you to the high,
Yeah,
right? We're talking about, self-confidence, and for a lot of people that are struggling, they're in that low spot. So I'll let you kind of do what you want to do.
Yeah. Without getting too much into it, I did view myself as less than that. I was never good enough, and I didn't have the best self-esteem. I had very low self-esteem for a big portion of my life, and I was very good at faking it. Where if I was in a crowd, I actually recently opened up with this to my parents because I never really told them this. And when I told them, my struggle whenever I was a kid and everything, they were just kind of shocked because I was always good at just kind of put on a smile and just going about my day.
Yeah.
Reality was, I don't want to say I was like depressed or anything. So I don't want to say I was like that far where I was thinking about, just suicide or anything. I wasn't like that far, but I did have very low self-esteem. I had a very negative view on the world too, and it all started because of a simple thing of that. I couldn't say words the right way. And it's I don't know. It really goes to show the lies that Satan will throw at you, and if you choose to but if you choose to acknowledge that and believe him, it can really mess you up. And messed me up for 13 years of my life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, now that I thought about it, I retract my previous statement. I do think.
What is your new statement?
Well, I think it has more so to do with not necessarily just my lack of hearing in general, but more specific on certain things. Like the only major issue with me not being able to hear very well was mostly with authority figures in my life.
Yeah.
Like what? Because most of them, you would usually assume, okay, this is loud and clear enough for him to be able to hear me. Why isn't he responding?
Yeah, some
He should be-
troublemaker kid just
Yeah.
not paying attention.
And most adults didn't see me that way. Most adults knew that I wasn't like that, but a lot of them thought I had a tendency of just like zoning out a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I do to a little bit of a degree, but not nearly the degree that I was. I mean, that's why I started kindergarten at 6 years old instead of 5, was because I did another year of preschool because my parents and my teachers were like, oh, he just can't sit still, can't pay attention. And I don't know. I think part of that, I was a kid and I didn't want to, but I don't know. My parents seem absolutely convinced that it was because of my hearing now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but, it is what it is. But, and the other specific thing was there were 2 things I was picked on a lot for as a kid. And it kind of just made me got me to a point where I was not very comfortable hanging out with everyone. Because it was around like 2nd grade where I started to realize, hey, not everybody just wants to be my friend anymore.
Mm.
Not everybody, is just willing to be buddy with every other kid out there.
Yeah.
Because, in kindergarten, the only issues you have is just like, I wanted that bag of chips. Give me that bag of chips. And that's about it. And then in 1st grade, you're kind of like, but I want to swing. I want to be his friend. I want to play with him. And you're like, no. And that's about it. But you get to 2nd grade, and that's where the cliques start to form.
Yeah.
2nd and 3rd grade is where the cliques and the outcastings and all that stuff starts to kind of fester.
Sure.
Maybe not outbreak yet, but fester.
Yep.
And that's where my I don't know if it was the pitch of my voice or the tone of my voice, but a lot of kids had issue with my voice for whatever reason. Even nowadays you can kind of have a slightly different tone than most people. I don't know if that's a hearing thing. I don't know if that's a sinuses thing. I don't know. But even now you can kind of hear it a little bit, but it was very different from most kids on the playground. And that kind of became an issue for my own confidence and my own willingness to just, be anything but outgoing to a certain degree, withdrawn to most degrees. And the other thing was just my hair. Apparently, I don't know why. They didn't like my hair.
I remember in elementary school, I didn't have curly hair, but if you had curly hair, that was girly. Curly was girly. And I remember there was a lot of bullying associated with that for certain kids.
I know that's not how it is now.
No, everybody's trying to get a perm, man.
Yeah, everybody's
That's
trying.
right.
That is true.
Everybody's trying to copy me nowadays.
The curls for the girls.
Yeah, no.
All right, Joe, you're next. Tell us
I'm next.
your deepest, darkest moments in your life.
Before I get there, and we may get into this at another time, but I'm thinking about the timeline, man. And I was one of those kids who was, you want to be my friend, and I was a punk to you about that. And we were not friends.
A little bit.
And
Really?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Jayware, we were not always.
I didn't know this.
I don't know if we have time to get into that on
Okay.
this episode, but
I mean,
That was.
you know how we
I
thought
really hate that, man.
you know how we thought you and Luke had just always been friends?
Oh yeah.
It's same thing, but
But
Okay.
reverse. Wow. Comes full circle.
it does.
But for me, you know, I didn't have any particular disability that really isolated me from anybody. And my first couple of years in elementary school, you know, you can't be friends with everybody, but I didn't feel like there was anybody that like just didn't want to be my friend. Until one of the things that I'm still bullied for to this day. Now I don't care about it anymore, but I was wearing a Mario shirt in the 4th grade, and someone told me that was a baby game, and they didn't want to hang out with me because of it.
Dang.
Which at the time really
Sheesh.
did rock my core. And looking back, a 4th grader can't play Mario games. That makes me a little bit mad. And then obviously as I started growing up, for different things, a lot of the time my response to stress was eating, and because of that, I've gotten quite large, and that also became a target for people to mess with me about that. That would mess with me. I didn't like people making fun of me for being fat.
Yeah.
And so I'd say I didn't have as serious of self-confidence issues because, at least at first, because the things that people were making fun of me for, in terms of like what games I was playing,
Yeah.
that was just kind of stuff that everybody would mess with people. It became more targeted at a time. But then when it came to, my weight, that was something where, well, when I would feel bad, I'd go to food anyways. And so that kind of became a cyclical cycle that is hard to break. I'm not going to say was hard to break. I'm still, I still turn to food for a lot of things, right? And so that was kind of where a lot of my self-confidence issues started. Going into middle school and then into high school, I just kind of felt like there were situations where I felt like people were really annoyed with me, and they thought that I was annoying just for things that I thought were normal, right? And so that made me think, well, I guess I don't want to bother them with who I am,
Yeah.
I remember, times in high school where I'd have this group of friends and we'd hang out and we'd talk in class, and we'd have the group chat, and it's like, well, one of them accidentally reveals that there's a second group chat that I'm not a part of, and that situation really hurt.
That stuff gets to me.
Dude,
a little
that's-
bit.
It really gets to me. There was a time where like all my friends were in this one class, and they just started making plans and like were actively excluding me, and I was like, y'all aren't even doing this like behind, like I'm just like a couple desks over, I can hear you.
Yeah.
And so when those couple of situations started to happen, that's where like a lot of my self-confidence issues didn't really start until later. And a lot of them were, it was harder to identify a particular point, It wasn't necessarily something I could find within myself that like was wrong or needed to be fixed. It was the whole of me. There's something wrong that these people don't want to be around me because of.
Yeah.
And working past that was extremely difficult. So that's kind of mine. Mine was not as young of an age, but
Okay, so now that we've gotten to middle school, for me in middle school, it had a lot to do with my experience in elementary school. All that happening in elementary school meant that at a certain point, I was no longer a part of anybody who wasn't, a part of the main crew, if you will.
How do you mean?
Group. Well, so you have the different cliques, okay? And some of the cliques will interact with each other. But then there's more offshoots, kind of people. And especially in my later half of elementary school, I was not in any certain specific clique. I would kind of was more of an offshoot, and we kind of formed our own little clique. And looking back, I guess there wasn't a whole lot I could have done about it, but I mean, those were probably like my least positively formulating. I don't know how to say this. Formulative years. I mean, because I hadn't even had a relationship with Christ yet at that age, and I was the strongest spiritually out of that whole group. But I felt like I couldn't really be friends with anybody else. Those are the friends I had, and so I mean that was tough. And so those friendships carried on into middle school, and that's whenever I started to realize, at that point I had had a relationship with Christ, and I started to realize, okay, these aren't necessarily beneficial people to be around. And so in middle school, kind of started to search elsewhere. And eventually I did kind of find some people who were maybe not, the strongest spiritually, but, they were, they at least had relationships with Christ, whereas the previous group that I was in didn't really. And I never really abandoned anybody from my friends. I still hung out with them, but I understood, like, from what we were talking about, those close friendships, I understood that, like, I couldn't be close with them in that way. And so, and also just we naturally started to, like, grow apart in interests as well. But the middle school was rough. Middle school was kind of a storm for everybody, I guess, because those are the years where you start to realize what's, what you have to leave behind, and what's important to you, and what needs to be important to you that may not be. And so, as we were going through middle school, got into a lot of disputes with what we would call the more popular kids, to the point where, like, there were a couple people who I was like on the verge of basically, like, hating them. And because, they treated me and those groups of those friends that I had for a while now, pretty badly, and treated us like, we weren't normal or so. And I don't know, it's like, even when they weren't insulting me, I knew they were just looking down on me all the time. And that's whenever I started, maybe not to get necessarily confidence, but more so like anger that was outwardly expressed. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have any more confidence. That just means that you're bottling it up. And so even as that kept festering and festering, I would say earlier years in middle school was probably my lowest point in terms of, like, self-confidence, because, like, I didn't really I couldn't see myself as anybody capable of just being friends with all different kinds of people. I saw myself as only being able to have these specific friends because I wasn't in with everybody else. And so, man, hearing myself say this stuff, I never really even thought of, like, looking back, like, on a regular basis, looking back, I don't think I would have thought about all this.
Self-reflection is something that we don't really do often enough. That's one of the things I like about this podcast is we're able to talk about life back in the gap, and be like, man, I never made that connection of this is why that I think about this in this way. And it's so subconscious, and like you were saying, you would have never really made that connection had I not said, Travis, we're going to talk about self-confidence tonight.
Yeah, no.
It was crazy. You think about stuff that's in your head, you try and process it inside your head. It's not the same when you speak it. You can't speak it. You're like, oh snap, crackle pop. It's I'm connecting the dots here. Oh yeah, middle school was terrible for me. uh,
Seems that way for everybody.
yeah, I think it's because in elementary school, I think there's still like a dependence there.
Yeah.
You're just like a little kid. In middle school, that's when you start to form like your own like decision. You start to really understand a little bit right and wrong, and I don't know. I feel like for some people, yeah, sorry, some people may say that the high school was their most like rebellious years, or college was, or middle school. For me, it was middle school. Because of my self confidence issues, I didn't have a relationship with Christ till I was 13. Got into middle school, I was 12 in the 6th grade, and I tried to fabricate confidence by pretending to be someone that I wasn't. I basically found my identity at that point. Instead of in Christ, I found it in social status, and I wanted to be one of the popular kids because I thought that was my way to be. I thought that was just like life, basically. I haven't really talked about this, man. I actually shared this story in Connect groups. I don't remember the last time it was. It wasn't the last time I did, but it was one of them. It was the first time I've ever shared this story. I'll share it now because this is how far I went. I don't know. It's like I thought the cool thing was to make fun of people, basically, and use like slanders and stuff, or just kind of spite somebody else. And there was a girl in class, and she got like a failing test, like a failing test grade, and I basically made fun of her in class, and I kid you not, like she looked at me right in the eyes, on the verge of legitimately crying, and she said, "I hate you," in front of the entire class.
Yeah.
And I found out later on that she had dyslexia, and that when she goes home, and this was people who were like friends with her, and basically her parents didn't want to sit down with her and teach her how to read and write and all that stuff. And so she was basically relying on people from like our middle school to teach her that stuff with that problem. You're talking about feeling like crap,
Yeah.
I'll never forget that. But yeah, I mean, it was so bad. My self-confidence drove me to, instead of finding Christ, I wanted to turn to other stuff. And so I started talking a certain way. I started dressing a certain way. I mean, everything about me, I was so uncomfortable with my own skin, all stemming from the stupid thing of like a stutter, right? And I changed everything about me. It got me nowhere. I was still miserable. I was still miserable in life. I had like trust issues too. I didn't really trust nobody because I always had this fear of that. Oh, you're just being nice to me because someone told you to be nice. When in reality, I mean, there were kids who made fun of me and stuff, but when I look back on it with like perspective now, I mean, it's just kids just being kids and saying dumb stuff. There were a lot of people who actually encouraged me throughout those years and legitimately wanted to be my friend, but I would push them away because I was like, nah, it's too good to be true, man. You're only trying to be my friend because Mr. or Mrs. So and so from like school told you to, or someone's parents told you to be nice to me.
I mean, it's interesting how much we focus on those negative interactions with so much more focus than all of the positive interactions that we have throughout our lives. And they're able to define how we act for years.
Yeah.
Satan's able to use those little moments to convince us that, well, I'm not good enough, so I have to do X, Y, Z to become good enough. And I think that's where a lot of our issues, for all of us, kind of come from. Is it may be a different situation, it may be a different particular circumstance, but Satan uses it to make us think you're not good enough. You need to do this to be good enough.
Yeah.
And I mean, with that story, you shared, you know, you have that awful weight of feeling like crap, and one of the easiest ways to make yourself feel good enough is to put yourself above someone else, right? Drag someone below you, and I know for myself, it was a long, and I still, have to work on this a lot. Is well, I can make myself feel better by judging others, right?
Yeah.
Even if that's just in my heart or in my head. Sometimes if it's, with the group in private, I can make fun of, so and so, but putting myself above that fixes the issue for a little bit, right? Um,
It is kind of like an easy out
It is, yeah.
because I've done that. I'll make myself feel great by putting someone down,
yeah,
And it's like, I don't know, it's weird too. That's like sin, like we're natural just sinners, and it's always one of those things where like, it'll make you feel good, like proud of yourself for like a little moment in time. But
Yeah.
once you kind of like reflect on it, it's like, man, I just hurt that person's feelings and make myself feel good.
yeah,
Yeah. And in a different way, like I was just sitting here thinking about how like how I normally like dealt with that self-confidence is I would look to other people who I felt like maybe had too much confidence or
Yeah.
or someone who was like
be like, oh, they're full of it.
overly
They're
confident.
yeah,
Yeah, full of
they're
it.
overcompensating because they're worse than
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, and I well maybe not overcompensating, but just like I would look to people who would take it too far, who
Mhm.
are full of themselves, anybody like that, and I would just like make them my enemy in my head.
Yeah.
And like through that, I had at least like at least like 5 enemies in my head, like
Yep.
every day, day to day, going through school, and that was not very healthy, because then that just
No,
made
not at
me
all.
like dread ever even just having any interactions with them,
Yeah.
because I mean obviously they could tell that I had an issue with them, and I did have an issue with them, and that would make me that would make me feel bad, and it make them feel bad, and you could never really get along, I guess.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it like, oh, it was all my fault. Maybe it was their fault as well, but like that wasn't the point. The point was that I couldn't see them as another, just another person just trying to go through middle school.
Mm-hmm.
I saw like I made them an enemy in my head, and like, and now that I look back, I mean, it wasn't until I was able to give that up that I was able to start to grow in my own self-confidence a little bit.
Yeah. I think that when it came to growing in my own self confidence, you do have to stop comparing yourself to other people, because
Yeah.
you're gonna find every sort of way that someone else is better than you, right? And really, what it comes down to is, well, here are my issues with self confidence. What parts of these are lies from Satan that just need to be eliminated,
Mm-hmm.
and what parts of these are, well, this is actually something I need to work on.
Yeah,
right?
for sure. Yeah.
This is, I'm not trying to justify. I'm not saying that someone's bullying you for a good reason, but
Yeah.
self improvement is a real thing,
Mm-hmm.
and there are some times that maybe you're lacking confidence in this area, and it might be the right thing that, well, I'm going to improve in this area then. And so, going back to self reflection, we have to really understand, why do I think the way that I do about myself in relation to other people, and then how do I take those thoughts and change them to think positively about myself. Because when we have these self-confidence issues, that hinders our ability to share Christ with others. That hinders our ability to encourage our other Christian brothers and sisters. And it stops us from growing in Christ ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think would this be a good time to transition to like what makes us confident now?
Yeah, I'd like to
Yeah.
kind of look at, we've really set the stage for some of our issues of self-confidence and where those stem from and how. So yeah, my question for you, Ware, is, what was that turning point, and how do you continue to grow in self-confidence?
Yeah, the turning point. So I gave my life to Christ at the age of 13 at a summer camp. And with that self-esteem issues and that lie that I believe that no one really cares about me and all that type stuff, that I didn't have any true friends. Well, basically, middle school, I tried to push out my real friends out, and everything, like people who genuinely tried to show love and encouragement, because I couldn't believe it. I tried to push them out of my life. Went to a summer camp for our church, or with our church, and gave my life to Christ. And I remember they do like the church thing where you kind of bow your head, you close your eyes, and it's like, hey, just raise your hand if you gave if you gave your life to Christ. And it says, well, if you raise your hand, then they come stand up here on stage, or stand in front of the stage. I went up there, and the turning point for me was, as I'm standing up there with a few other kids from some other churches, I look at our youth group, and so these were the people I was trying to push out of my life.
Yeah.
And there were a couple kids from like school that didn't go to our church that were trying to encourage me. But people I'm friends with today, and like people who was like, I wasn't even friends with back then, but I'm friends with them now, were there. And I see like our entire youth, well, not just like our youth group, the entire room just going nuts. And that me and some other kids gave our life to Christ. And I'm seeing our youth group, a group of people I try to push out, that to be honest with you, before I gave my life to Christ, I cared nothing about God. I was born in a Christian family, cared nothing about God. I didn't care to pursue a relationship with Him. And something just clicked that night, and I thank God it did. And I see like our entire group just clapping and cheering and encouraging me. And it was kind of like the clicking point. I was like, man, like this love, it's genuine, it's real, it's not a fabricated thing. So it all just kind of clicked for me that night.
Yeah.
And the way I keep going with that is, I feel like so many times we look for, hey, well, God is moving. Well, what's like the big thing He's doing in life? Which, I mean, like, now God does big things, but God can do the big things within the small things, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I always look for, what is God doing in every area of my life to encourage me?
Yeah.
And I remember a story when I was in high school. It was sophomore year, and I had an English class, and we're doing this like round table discussion thing, which didn't really make sense because it's English. I don't know why we're doing this round table discussion thing. This whole like debate type thing.
Yeah.
I don't remember what the debate was. It was something about, because like it was some political thing, and we're having that debate in class. And so it was really a phase of my life in which I now believe that, hey, people love me and they're trying to encourage me, but there was still some struggle there. Being this new area of life that I was in, this new phase of life, and I spoke up, and I was scared to death because I hated school at one point in my life, where I was scared to death to be called on in class because of my confidence and all that stuff. And so I still haven't gotten over that. And I spoke up. I said my opinion on whatever we were talking about. And I felt like I just stumbled through the entire thing. I felt like, oh, I screwed that up. I sound stupid because I was stuttering. My point wasn't clear. And there was a girl in that class, and I wasn't even like friends with her or anything. And she made a point after class to give me some encouraging words.
Yeah.
And I thought that was just freaking awesome, which at the time I just kind of moved on, just said, oh, well, that's nice. I kind of moved on with life. And I look back on that now. It's like, that was God trying to give me some confidence, like encouragement in that moment right there of like, we have to stop just saying, oh, that's just a good thing that happened, or just a bad thing. It's like, I mean, I believe everything happens for a reason. Everything happens for a purpose. I don't believe in just pure accidents, So I do believe that was God in that moment trying to help me, which is actually funny too. So I look back on that moment and I see how I was after in our other discussions, not only for that class, but for other ones, and reflecting on that, I was more confident speaking because someone made a point to tell me that they were really encouraged by my willingness to speak up and all that stuff. So,
Yeah.
So really just latch on to those moments. Like stop treating a moment. I don't care how small it is. Like if it's like a positive thing, man, like or gal, guy or gal, whoever is listening to this, just
Yeah.
latch on to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can find encouragement from small things, and sometimes it's all you need to keep going and keep trying. Is that little bit of encouragement, and that's why it's important for us to encourage one another, because you don't know how a small thing, whether it's a text or just a little comment you make to somebody, is going to really affect their outlook for months to come, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so encouraging one another is one of the biggest ways that we can grow in our self-confidence. It's another one of those things that we can't do alone, right? God gave us community for a reason. And I think we all talked about having issues with certain friendships we had in middle school and high school. I know for myself, when a lot of those friendships I had in high school, those people ended up not really wanting to be my friend anymore. Well, where did I go? I went to my friends in the student ministry, right? Travis and Josh specifically, I mean, have been my closest friends for years, and over the past couple of years, getting to grow my relationship, with you and Luke and different people in our young adult ministry today. Those people, those relationships, I feel, I don't just feel like invited or just like a oh, well, these are the people that I hang out with. I feel like I'm a part of something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that gives me so much more confidence to speak up, make my opinions heard. And then when I do meet new people, when I am in these situations that I may have been extremely uncomfortable, being a part of before, I am able to have that confidence now.
Yeah.
Right. And that's still a difficult thing. That's still something that we have to actively work on.
Mm-hmm.
But having the encouragement has helped a lot.
I know for myself, like the big turning point for me was like somewhere in 8th grade. Somewhere in 8th grade, I started, like, at that point in time, I started taking things a lot more seriously.
Mm.
And that was whenever I started taking, like, youth more seriously. I remember that year was kind of a defining year for us in the youth, or my 8th grade year freshman of high school year. And more so the start of that year. So maybe right before you went to high school.
Yeah.
And that year was kind of like a defining year for me, because that was when, like, our core friends in the youth group were really, really consistent. And that's whenever I felt like we had a group that we were like, that, I mean, felt like another, more like an extended family. Like, these were people I got to see often, and who I didn't have to act a certain way. I could just act, well, I had to behave, but anyways, I didn't have to act a certain way that I was uncomfortable with. I could just be myself, and that level of confidence is just hugely helpful. And also, like, at that point in time, I kind of found the people in high school that I was, like, these were the people that were, like, truly valued me as a person, and that, they may not have been, the same kind of friendships that I have with you and Josh and Ware and other people that were in our youth at the time. They weren't the same friendships, but these were the friendships that, I was given that were going to help me out in the time, And so I feel like that was a defining year for me, because that's whenever I realized that, I could start giving up, focusing on what other people were doing, focusing on, who had it out, who, in quotation marks, had it out for me, and, like, what, people I couldn't, in quotation marks, couldn't associate with, and stuff like that. At that point in time, I was like, these are the people that I care about. These are the people whose opinions I care about. And beyond that, I started not really care what somebody else was gonna say. And at that point in time, like, I mean, somebody comes to my head. I'm not gonna say his name, but I mean, literally that year, like the year before, we were butting heads, and then that year we were kind of chill.
Mm-hmm.
We were sitting next to each other in math class, and we were able to crack a few jokes and get through the class, and even have a few conversations and be fine. And I started to realize that it was because of everybody's collective maturity, but also like everybody's collective realization of what matters is a specific group of people. Their opinions are what matters to me. And I guess coming to that realization and realizing that, like, at the end of the day, it's not about what all these people have to say. It's not about other people's opinions. It's about doing what's right, and trying to grow closer to the Lord, and holding those people that are in your life close to you, and realizing that your own self-confidence is should mostly be grounded in the Lord, but we're humans and we need other humans to help us out.
Yeah, we definitely got to allow God to work. And also, and both y'all mentioned this, it's like we have to work on ourselves as well, because it's not just going to happen where one day we wake up and we're like, all right, I'm Mr. Confidence,
That's the
It's
thing.
like, we got to be willing to say, what, I need to work on this. And we just filmed an episode for this podcast about our roles, in teaching and everything. And man, that has done wonders for me, because I still struggle with it. I mean, it's like, there's times I'll be in a connect group or something, or I'll be in like, just basically I'll be very quiet, and I won't really want to share my opinion because I'm scared of what someone else will think. And being a leader and leading, a Sunday school, or right, whatever it is, that's helped me be more confident, because here's something where God gave me the opportunity to do it, and I took it. Now for other people, it may not be like a teacher. It may be something else. It may be like Fight Praise Team, or it may be just something simple as just being willing to speak up in like a small group discussion.
Yeah.
I mean, it may be very simple as that. You just taking advantage of all the little opportunities that God gives you in life will help you be more confident.
Yeah, and kind of go into what I would consider my turning point on self-confidence. My sophomore year of high school, all kind of out of nowhere. I wasn't really expecting this. I had a lot of responsibilities thrown at me, and I was extremely nervous about them. One of them, for example, I had my first job, right? And that job has a lot to do with, checking off a list, but also interacting with customers. That's something I've never done before. I can barely talk to people my age. Now I got to talk to people that are older than me and act as an authority because I'm, the person who works here. I was able to build self-confidence there. That was the year that you and a lot of the seniors left, and all of a sudden I'm the oldest guy in our student ministry. And I'm like, that makes me a leader in ways that I wasn't ready for yet. I thought I had a few more years, but at that point in time, there just wasn't anyone else, above me.
Yeah.
And also a couple of, more things in my personal life that we'll probably go into at other times with my family. Like, I had a lot of responsibility and a lot of leadership that I had to it was thrust upon me and I didn't necessarily seek out. But through that built my self-confidence so much because I was able to rely on God to get me through it and have God work through me and use those different situations for His benefit. And because of that, it became easier, right?
Yeah.
It was about putting the work in. Self-confidence does get easier the more time you spend working on it.
Yeah, I know for me, maybe that year or the year before, somewhere around there, It's kind of murky where it was, but like the thing that made a vast difference is, okay, I'm not gonna get into it, but I had very like complicated, strange, hardly anything like disputes and anyway, I'm not gonna beat around the bush. Anyway, in middle school, I had a lot of weird middle school relationships that were hardly anything yet so dramatic, and anyway,
This is real and true.
Joey had to hear all about it. He was living next to me.
I got to hear all about it. It was really funny.
Anyway, looking back, it was stupid, but in a way, I could see how God could have used it to kind of like bolster my confidence a little bit, because with a couple, anyway, without getting too much into it, it came to a point where I had to realize that I had to cut it off completely. And there was another instance where I realized where I was the one, getting broken up with, and I was like, dang, now I just got to sit here and deal with all this embarrassment because she just did it in front of the whole class. Anyway, anyway, so those two instances kind of like helped a little bit, but that's kind of what started the motion. And really what carried it on is I think a lot of teachers that I had in my freshman year of high school were very encouraging to me, because they could kind of tell that I wasn't as outgoing as I could have been. And they were like, you know what, Travis, you're a smart kid. You seem nice and everything. And I just want to encourage you to keep, like the couple times that I would have fun in the class, or like the times that I would have fun in the class, that I don't know, I could just, without them necessarily verbally telling me, I could tell that they were encouraging me to continue and just like have fun with my daily life and enjoy what I'm doing. And same way with a lot of other things, and just being able to have that core group of friends that I could be around all the time really helped. And having that great support from the youth ministry, because that was also about the same time where I don't remember if I had gotten involved in youth leadership at the time, but I was about to. And that was a time where I was like, where I started to realize that Ware and Luke and all of them were starting to lead the youth ministry. And I was like, you know what, even though we're real young, Joey's not the only one who's going to, obviously it would be really hard if Joey was the only older guy trying to do things the right way. But, and because me and Josh were such close friends with Joey, it was kind of understood that the three of us would, start to try and be the leadership there. And that was another thing that also really helped my confidence. All of that going on at the same time kind of just like made me realize that, well, because in all instances, I started to realize that, oh gosh, trying to put this into words. Anyway, in all instances, I realized that it was less about my emotions and more about like who I could be, And I guess that's the important thing, is focusing on who you could be.
Yeah.
And maybe not in like oh, no, I'm disappointed that I didn't get to this level, I don't measure up, but more like no, regardless of whatever you did today or whatever you did in the past, you still have a chance and you still could be this person.
Yeah.
So
It's all about progress. It's all about, setting realistic expectations for yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
You don't want to set yourself up for failure, but working on self-improvement to be more confident. Sometimes you can be confident in who you're becoming, not necessarily who you are. And so I think as we kind of wrap it up for today, that's kind of where I want to leave it. Right? We talked a lot about self-reflection. Right? If you're struggling with self-confidence, which if you're watching this podcast, you are, because you're a human. Reflect on, what are you struggling with really? What are the individual pieces of yourself that you find unsatisfactory? And then, once you do that, what parts of those are lies straight from Satan? And what parts of those are things that you need to work on, right? You need to give to God. You need to improve in your life. And then as you make those improvements, don't be too hard on yourself.
Yeah.
You know, for a lot of us, myself especially, it is so easy for me to get in this cycle of, oh, well, I'm not good because of this, and so I'm going to turn to this sin. Oh, and now I'm struggling with sin, so I feel bad about myself, so we're going to go back. And, setting yourself in a cycle like that is just going to leave you worse than where you started.
Mm-hmm.
So be realistic with your expectations. Have Christian community, have fellowship. That's where a lot of us find, our confidence today is in each other.
Mm-hmm.
But most importantly, find your confidence in Christ. Any closing thoughts before we say goodbye?
No, I think we're good. We've been now live for 5 hours. So
Straight up. Travis, what you got? Anything?
Just that, if the opportunity ever comes up to you, to get out of your comfort zone and do something that God may want you to do that would require you to be confident and bold, don't hesitate to take it. Take the opportunity, and as long as you're going to have time for it, that's a whole nother thing, time management. But if it's something that's going to make you uncomfortable that you're kind of shy away from, it may be a situation that multiple people have shared this before, but where they have to say yes before they start to get shy, and before they start to shy away from it and say no. And if it's within your abilities, I'd say take that, do that thing that is going to make you uncomfortable, because it's just going to help you out later on.
Yeah. Exposure therapy is a great way to work through fears, work through confidence. Well, that's all I have. Thank you, one and all, for listening to the Back in the Gap podcast. We will see you next Thursday.